So this presentation is about an issue in higher education. We had to do a annotated bibliography where we researched different articles related to the issue. And so from everything that I read, this is the topic that I came up with. The Journey to the Ivory Tower, Black Woman's Story of Higher Education Leadership. And so starting off with the quote, understanding the relationship between identity and leadership can help build the knowledge on individuals' development and future behavior as leaders. A lot of the articles were really based in qualitative research. And so looking at the phenomenological approach, uncovering the underlying meaning of multiple participants and their shared lived experiences. So looking at the shared lived experiences of Black women in higher education and really getting a deeper understanding of those experiences. Some of the framework is approached from a Black feminist lens. And so really looking at Black women's voices, validating their ways of knowing and living in society, especially in navigating higher education. And then also looking at the lens with a critical race theory approach. And so challenging the dominant ideology of taking a neutral stance and really rejecting that color blindness of saying, I don't see color, but actually seeing color and legitimizing the stories of people of color. So some of the key terms that I do feel are important for people to understand is one, ivory tower. So ivory tower is a term that has been referenced. I've even had someone reference that to a previous position I've held in higher education, that I was in the ivory tower. And it's a condition or a place. So for me, it was a place. It was a physical location on campus. It's related to academia. And it's regarded as isolated or withdrawn from the practical affairs of society or how the rest of the campus operates. Another term when thinking about Black women experiences is crucibles. And so these are intense, identity challenging, traumatic, unforeseen, unique, adverse experiences. So talking about adversity. So these crucible experiences that are traumatic, constant adversities that Black women are facing in higher education. And then this idea of white gaze. And so Black women being held against a white background. And so this comes from an article that actually referenced to Nora Zill Hurston against a white background, and really about being seen as colored when you are against that white background. And so white gaze communicates whiteness. It's this lens that determines how Black women are seen, how they behave, and where they can be. And so really what I want to focus on is looking at this strong Black woman schema. And so I do feel like Black women take this up as like armor of being this superwoman that has this supernatural ability to do all things, to do anything. And really that superwoman schema has come from trying to counter the negative images of Black women. So in looking at Mammy as an image and looking and thinking about Jezebel. And so superwoman is more of this positive strength, fearless type of person. And so it's an unyielding strength that Black women have, this assumption of multiple roles. And so really being the head of a house to hold it together, to be that confidant for the children, to be that nurturer for the children, to be the one to take care of a husband, to be the one to hold a family unit together. And also thinking about in the workplace, just carrying on multiple roles as well. This self-sacrifice that comes with this strong Black woman schema. And so sacrificing your time, sacrificing your resources, sacrificing just that self-care that Black women should have, constantly creating this environment where there is self-sacrifice happening. And then the last thing is that failure is not an option. Instead of a Black woman failing, she will do everything, even if it means staying up all night, working constantly. Failure is not an option. So when you think about that supernatural, there have been times where I've had people ask me and say, like, I don't know how you do it. And it's almost this concept of being supernatural and being able to do all things. And so when we look at higher education, we really need to look at where this takes up space. One of the things to really understand is about these 8 organizational perspectives. And I've worked in higher education for 13 years. And it was recently, within the past 6 months, that I actually learned that there are these organizational perspectives. So I feel like it is also a privilege to know that these worlds, these platforms, these perspectives exist. And so with this idea of a super hero, in my mind, it's that I'm navigating between all these worlds. I'm navigating all of these spaces constantly. So this space of organized anarchy, where it's really this thought, like, don't try to make sense of it, just go with it and it'll all work itself out. The collegium, really looking at, in terms of faculty, like we're equals, but in reality, we're actually not equals. We don't share the same power dynamics. People who are white have privilege that people of color do not have in higher education spaces. Looking at those cultural lenses, prioritizing legacy and tradition of that campus. What is the legacy and the tradition and the symbolism in that on a particular campus? Even though that campus might be a Hispanic serving institution, an HSI, or an MSI, a minority serving institution, what is the legacy and the tradition of that campus? If you're looking at it with that political lens, you're looking at that whole, like, if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And what does that mean for the role of Black women in navigating higher education? Bureaucracy, this is a place for everyone and everyone has their place. And so I think this comes with knowing what your place is, when to be visible, when to be present and to take up space, but also knowing that in certain spaces you're gonna be invisible. And then this new science, we're interconnected with our environment, feminists, we're all in this together. And then spiritually, bringing your whole self to the environment, but really, if you're not able to be your authentic self, feeling like you've failed in that particular setting. So as a Black woman, constantly having to navigate all of these different worlds and sometimes navigating all of these worlds in one encounter. So in one of the articles, there was an experience of a Black woman saying that, when she steps into a room, she doesn't know if people are looking at her gender, her ethnicity, or her race. So how are people evaluating her? But also being in a room where you're constantly thinking about when to speak up and what you're going to say because of the other people in that room. So when you take into account the different perspectives of the people that can be in that room and the lens they're bringing, you're constantly questioning when to speak up, if what you're saying is going to be perceived the right way, because not everyone in that room looks like you. So you think about all of that stress of navigating these worlds, and then you add navigating those worlds with these, basically what I'm saying are racial battle fatigues. And so you're looking at Black tax. You're looking at having to work twice as hard just to get half as far. These additional duties that are put upon you to serve on committees, because there's not a lot of Black representation on committees. And so sometimes you're checking the box for somebody who's Black, but you're also checking the box for somebody who's a woman in the room. And so just thinking about serving on committees, thinking about mentoring students, fixing problems at the campus, and then helping navigate those racial issues at the campus. These are on top of doing your regular job responsibilities. If you are someone whose job is to advise students, you are supposed to be advising students. You're supposed to be in meetings with students, reading unofficial transcripts, preparing for meetings, contacting students. But you're also asked on top of that to do these other things and to do them within this work time, and not to complain or do it at a lower quality, because that's not something that we do. We're not going to submit something at a lower quality because we know it's going to be judged with this white gaze. Then the presentation of authentic self. So really navigating a space with a filtered version of who you truly are. And so one of the things is being measured against this white beauty standard, this Eurocentric beauty standard of what your hair looks like. There's a movement right now with Black women in natural hair, but Black women have poured a lot, billions of dollars into hair products, into wigs, extensions, braids, to perms, all types of things to meet this white standard of beauty. Also in their skin complexion with skin discoloration creams, the clothing, how they wear certain clothing, what their body looks like in certain clothing, and then even their style. Speaking using your hands. So if you're speaking and you're using your hands, some people can think that that is aggressive, that you need to present yourself in a certain way. So constantly having to be aware of like, what are your hands doing when you're talking? And then fighting this socialized feeling of this angry Black woman. When you're in meetings, controlling your facial expressions, controlling your body language and any emotions, the tone in your voice, if you're responding to something, if you cross your arms or your legs, all of these things are constantly under this gaze to control how we act and respond in certain situations. And then code switching, which we code switch in society, and then also having to code switch at work. So this filtered version of who we truly are. And lastly, microaggressions, which people have heard of the term, but there's multiple types of microaggressions. The first is a micro assault, and that's basically an old-fashioned racist comment, calling someone the N-word, doing something very blatant that is right in front of their face. Micro insults, these align more with what people think of when they think of microaggressions. These are actions that can be verbal or nonverbal. A lot of times they're meant to be a compliment. People can say them to be a compliment, but really it comes down to an insult. It's demeaning. So telling somebody you speak so well, or when somebody says they're an engineer, or they're the project manager, or they're the president of something, and saying, wow, you must be really smart. The reason why that can be an insult is because for years, Black people were thought of as less intelligent. They were not allowed to read. And so when people are saying those types of things, it comes across as though it is a surprise or it is an exception to what people believe about an entire group of people. And so really thinking about being genuine when saying or giving compliments. Is this going to be perceived as a compliment, or is this person going to feel like I'm demeaning them by stating this? And then micro invalidations. This is really denying or devaluing people's experiences. When somebody tries to share an experience or a situation, interaction that just happened, and they're like, well, I was meeting, or I was walking over here and I was talking to such and such, and they said this, and you know, it really made me feel a certain way. And for someone to say, oh, you're just being paranoid, that's devaluing that person's experience. And so these are all forms of microaggression. While we are navigating these organizational perspectives, trying to scratch somebody's back and to, you know, understand our place and that we are not all equal and that we have this power dynamic between us, and going with the flow, trying not to, you know, work against anything, just waiting to see how things pan out. When we're dealing with all of that, we are dealing with these different types of discrimination. When you take all of that, a strong Black woman's superpower is this adaptive capacity. It's her capacity, her ability to be resilient. So one form of resiliency is this adaptive capacity. It is to modify yourself in order to maintain or achieve a desired state. It's to create new meaning. It's to look at something a different way, to convince yourself that you can rise above it. So Black women are constantly rising above it and rising above it. Through that, these women are constantly modifying themselves. And so it's almost like when we think about code switching, it's like a mutation. In any environment, we're mutating how we appear and how we carry ourselves in order to survive, in order to combat the discrimination that we are experiencing. One of the things that is really important to me is having, you know, this positive mental state. And for me, Rise Up by Andra Day is one song that is in my playlist. And I just think about how she talks about moving mountains and rising up, and I'll do it 1,000 times. You know, I'll do it 1,000 times again. What I'm hearing her say is failure is not an option. And I'm going to keep showing up. And I'm going to keep taking up space, and I'm going to keep talking about it. And I'm going to keep doing this because failure is not an option. Quitting is not an option. And somebody has to advocate. One of the things that I really wanted to show was some artwork by one of my students who is so talented, but I was sharing with this student about my topic and kind of this visual in my head. I couldn't get it out. I couldn't sleep. And I was like, I can't get it out. It's not one image. It's almost like I need people to see what I'm feeling, what I'm reading, and how I'm connecting to what these other Black women's experiences are. My student, she drew something, and she drew this storyboard, this comic about a woman sleeping, waking up, and then having a child that she's taking and working on her phone. She has a deadline today. The kid has soccer practice. She's not really engaged with the kid. And then at work, just having this conversation, being in this space, and then having somebody say, like, you can do it. You always do it. And so there's this idea that Black women are always going to do it, that we have this capacity. We're going to keep increasing, and we're going to keep taking on more projects, and we're going to keep doing it, right? Because that's what's expected. We can always do it, just like we always do. And then being up late at night. So being a staff member, being a student, thinking about my responsibility as the mother of children and just in my family, and just being a person having deadlines in life while the kid is asleep. I'm up working still. And so all of that is what the day looks like. And then on the other side is just internally what it feels like I can't do this anymore. And these are the feelings and the experiences that are constantly projected and pushed upon Black women in their lives from the time that they're young girls. And so this is, being inferior. This is one of the pursuit of why Black women are chasing after that doctoral degree, to be a doctor. This idea of hashtag Black excellence. It's to prove that we're not inferior, that we can take up the same space as other people. And then feeling used and tired, shamed, oppressed, lonely, exhausted, unwanted. And in some of these situations, Black women are sacrificing their personal lives to chase these leadership opportunities. So they're giving up those moments in time to have a family, to find a husband, to find a partner, to be around family who will support them, to go to institutions that they can be in a leadership position, but they might be completely alone. And in all of that, there's also women that in this community of Black women in higher education, the higher we move up out of support roles and into leadership roles, the less Black women are represented. And so the circle of other Black women we can talk to gets smaller. And so there is this place of feeling alone because there's no one that we can identify with in that same space that we are in. So after looking at all of this, one of the things that I really want to think about is just the model of leadership development for Black women. So using limited resources, overcoming greater adversity, having greater resilience, and then that's where you get to your leadership development. This is how Black women are developed to be leaders. It's constantly overcoming adversity and increasing that resiliency. With that, I've learned that with overcoming adversity constantly, experiencing crucibles constantly, these traumatic experiences, there's some other exploration we need to take consideration of. One is the research. When I was reading one of the articles, it said 63% of the research out there uses semantic language. It's basically saying language that's socially acceptable. Instead of calling things what they are, they're using language that is softer, that doesn't necessarily communicate the exact experience. And so we need to look at how we are sharing the experiences. Are we saying exactly what Black women's stories are? Are we softening it because we want other people to publish the articles? I also think about what is the influence of the strong Black woman and leadership attainment on Black women's mental and physical health. I mean, you're talking about traumatic experiences, and that can mean that women are up all night long, that they're not sleeping, that they're sick more often, that they're experiencing more health issues, that they are experiencing more mental illness because of it. The experiences of multiracial Black women. I'm multiracial. I'm a biracial woman. And so for me, I feel like owning my Blackness and really understanding that when I walk into a room, my skin color walks and is seen and is visible before I even open my mouth. So certain people already have a preconceived notion of who I am as a person, or my educational level, or what I'm going to be able to contribute to the conversation. And so I'd like to maybe explore more about what multiracial Black women's experiences are, exploring what Black trans women in leadership look like. What do their experiences look like? And then also looking at different campus types and which campuses are retaining and promoting Black women in leadership and which campuses are losing, which campuses are Black women leaving leadership positions. And then the final area that I could possibly explore is examining the socialization of Black female graduate students on a path to higher ed. And so are Black women pursuing higher education as their career choice? Or are they looking to be a graduate student to go into a different field? And so where is that pipeline of more Black women in higher education leadership? That is really what my topic was. These are a lot of the articles that I've read. There's a book I'm reading right now by Collins called Black Feminist Thought. And so I'm excited to read that. It was cited in several of the articles. But there's definitely a lot to explore and to learn, and I'm working towards hopefully identifying a dissertation topic.